Good afternoon, all of you. This is Dr. Amit. Uh, we have been serving the industry of data and AI technologies for last 2 decades now. I have done my PhD in artificial intelligence from New York University, and my second PhD is on data science from University of Florida. We at Data Tech Labs, along with UAE AI CAM and the ministry, have crafted this journey. We said that we will be talking about game tech on AI. Now, when we talk about game tech with AI, let us see and understand what is the mindset from the technical perspective, from a coder, from a AI enthusiast, on what and how is the need of the industry when it comes to gaming. A question which is there on the presentation right now, which you all can see, is very obvious, right? Do you like to play games? Please post your responses on the chat. Yes or no? I would request you all to be muted and post all the responses on the chat. Today, we all know that yes, everybody, most of the technology users are big fans of working and defining the games. Now, games will be from different aspects, different domains, different users, and different experiences. So, yes, based on our interest, we will decide which game to play and how to play. And there are various means to it. Today, you all might be aware that there are online games, there are application based games, there are Windows based games, and different aspects. In our session, we will go with each of it one by one. Second question, yes, this is the most important question for you guys to evaluate. Programming is one important part of life, one important part of your career. Analytics and AI and algorithms is another important part to give experience. But as an individual, if you have that intent to develop your own games and market them as a business, this is the right platform for all of us to evaluate and understand the technical architecture as well as the business interest and architecture. What things you need to consider when we plan to create and define the games. Can I know your interest levels here, guys? Are you all with me? Please post how many of you would want to secretly develop their own game, whether it's a fiction game, whether it's a sports game, whether it's an intellectual game. There are different aspects. Yes, absolutely. Fantastic, guys. If you all have intent to develop games, today would be the first stepping stone where you should plan. We all will plan and strategize on what all is needed to develop a game from the business perspective. Third important question, when we talk about games, what are the important factors which we need to consider? Because in a game, there is start and end. Similarly, we define technically a game into two important aspects. One, first, is the casual variable, which is the current state. And second is the desired variable, which is the desired state. The first important part is strategizing the current and the desired states. And then we come to the development tactics of creating these games, which starts with infrastructure, which starts with servers, which starts with different genres it starts with different players and whatnot when it is defined at different segments. So basically what happens is game designing is a complete process of visual, audio, imagination, and technology that plays a major role while we have this created and defined in the landscapes. Now let's try and understand what are the different roles or elements which are important in designing the game. So when we talk about different games and different elements, let us start with the manpower. Yes, we need or we have to define and identify correct game designers. Then we will need game developers who are looking for the way to develop, deploy, and host the games. Guys, this is a very important term, and we are going to talk about this technically in our tomorrow's lecture. Hosting a game is a very important. It's not only about design, it's not only about development, it's not only about deployment, but it is about hosting to define the consistency and performance. Then we also need game artists who are looking for different game development tools that allows to create lifelike experiences. These three important layers kickstart the thought process. Then we have game producers, game administrators, and other professionals who would associate to create the interest. And that basically defines the correct way with which we create our gaming elements. It's very important to evaluate what makes a great game. And trust me, guys, this answer to this question is different for different user. Millions of users play game, and the great game will have important aspects. But today, let us talk about not the products which are hosting the games, but different ways with which how we create these games and different channels. So what happens is the most important part while creating your game development team is create a structured approach of what we want to develop and who would be responsible to develop that. So every game that is developed is created with a game development team that works to bring the game to life. The team is comprised of various roles that work together to determine how the game is designed, how the game is developed, how the game is deployed, and how the game is promoted in the market. These responsibilities are supported by the game development tools or tool companies or hosting companies like Microsoft, AWS, Alibaba, Google, and whatnot. These all are different segments of how we will create the structures of games which will play an important role on identifying how this was developed. Now, it's very important for all of us to distribute. It's very important for all of us to distribute on understanding the difference between a video game and the development or technical aspects of a program. A game played by electronically manipulated images produced by computer program on television screen is a video game. Having said that, while we define the gaming practices, it's very important for all of us to understand the difference of how the games will perform. What is the difference between movie and a software, a recorded video and the gamified video? And for that purpose, we will have the complete game development team, because behind every game, a dedicated game development team determines the game's design, development, deployment, and promotion. Each member of the team has a different role, such as design, development, promotion, and different aspects of each activity. To take you a briefly through a game designer is responsible for designing a game's engaging experience for the player. The type of game development is considered along with required compute and database solutions. So, guys, it's very important that compute, which is the processor which executes the game, and the database, which decides the different patterns and different structures which will create a different values of the game, are very important. And that's where game designer will consider while architecting it. Similarly, we have a game developer, which is responsible to create or implement games engaging experience. It could be based on different languages like Python, languages like R, languages like C++, languages like different scripts, or by using tools like Unity, like AWS GameSec, and whatnot. So developers will be tool specific. And then we have game artists. A game artist brings the game alive visually with a game engine and its respective graphics and physics, or which are the features which are required for all of us to apply on different visuals when it comes to audio, when it comes to video, when it comes to screen capture. At times, the game artist may work directly with the talent to have additional components in that game, and all of them will be an important and integral part on how these game developers will work. Guys, it's very important for all of us not to forget the game administrator, because game administrator ensures that the game is available to users. Most of the game administrators work is defined or is after deployment. And then we have producers, which are live or which take decision based on the live data and live questions and live activities, because game receives operational maintenance, uh, uh, which is an ongoing task to ensure that experience is fantastic for every user. So we need to understand different phases. Now this was about the team, but now let us try and understand the people who would be working, the people who would be working on developing these games. Guys, before I get into the next topic, we will give you sufficient time to ask your questions. We will try and answer all the questions. Having said that, please keep noting down your questions, because you start posting it on the chat, they will probably go up or down somewhere where we might miss it. So, guys, whenever we open for Q&A, at that point in time, we can start taking questions. For now, let us indulge into the discussion and understanding of the topic which we are trying to cover. So, all your technical, administrative, and supportive questions will be answered in the Q&A section before the end of the session today. We will have sufficient time for doing that. So, do not worry, and let's focus on understanding the fundamental of game tech, because while you plan to create your own game, it is very important to select the right team with the right role. We just discussed about right team and right role of a game development team, development company. Now we will move on to the next topic to understand how difference and what is the business strategy. We also need to understand and define the correct strategy on how interactive the games should be and how the movies and softwares will play a different role. Because when you start or when you create your game, you certainly aim to do good amount of business, and there has to be experience and iteration in that game. So game basically is a combination of art, business, and science and technology. These are the three important pillars of the game technology which we plan to build. And these game technologies have to be encapsulated in these segments where we will have correct information on what needs to be built. So, game tech first needs the correct team to be in place. Once the correct team is in place, we can talk about having the correct infrastructure, people around art, business, and sciences. And how does this work? It basically has different structures, which talks about graphics, which talks about movie, which talks about startup, which talks about functions, and which talks about different gaming options, which starts about front end, which talks about sound, which talk about loading screen, which talk about different verticals of these options. So what basically happens, guys, what happens while we create these sessions all together, uh, while creating a game development, because game development is an iterative process. Now, what do you mean by iterative process? Iterative process means it keeps on changing. It needs modification. It needs continuous modification. It has different loops which are defined, and it will have different values which needs to be worked out. So developers adjust the features based on the feedback so that audience is constantly using updated and relevant game material in the different intervals. So game development is certainly an iterative process, but in this iterative process, it has different phases. Different phases start from pre-production, pre-alpha, alpha, beta, and live release. And all of these phases are around front end, game options, sound options, video options, and loading screen. And the complete structure of the game is around the gameplay which is created. Now, let me take you through each one of it one by one. But the first and the most important, guys, we are getting technical now. I would again reiterate these 5 steps are most important part of gaming when you plan to build your own game, when you plan to strategize and launch your own game so that you can make good money and good exposure in the industry. So I will reiterate, this is a 5 step process for developing game. The first is pre-production, second is pre-alpha, third is alpha, fourth is beta, and fifth is live release. Now, let me talk about each of it and people involved in each of this process. The first, which is pre-production phase, this phase, we need three important teammates, one designer, one developer, and one artist. Because in pre-production phase, and that's where the game development begins, the team members are identified and an understanding is gained of the engine and platform for the game. In this phase, the team develops the initial game concept. Guys, please note, in this phase, the team develops the initial game concept. This is done in a game design document which acts as a living document for all team members. The game element such as art, audio, gameplay are designed in this phase and documented. And it includes concept, pitch, design, features, timelines, and budgets. The game designers, the game developers, and artists are involved in this phase. And the game engine is selected as a technology for hosting the game. The game designer writes the storyline, develops the pseudocode and code snippet. So, guys, for your understanding, pseudocode is the easy English format of how you want your game to perform, and the code snippets, which is in basic English, and create the design and the game mechanics. This is the core responsibility of game designer to maybe draw on a whiteboard or a notepad or a document or a design for a collaborative, because we are still at the planning stage. Post this is done, a game artist begins to create models or textures or animation of objects or environments or characters, because these features will create an understanding for next set of phase. So the final output of this pre-production phase is the creation of all components and elements that are needed to assemble the game. This includes artwork and code. Those pieces are then compiled in the next phase, which is the pre-alpha phase. I hope you guys are clear. The first phase, which is pre-production, which is very important for all of us to understand and start the game development activities. Second important phase, which we just spoke, or probably second phase in the complete game development process, starts with pre-alpha or vertical slice. Now, as the name suggests, pre-alpha or vertical phase, a game developer and artist compile the mechanics and storyline together with the code snippets to build a prototype of the game. So, a prototype of the game is something which is developed in the phase 2. A prototype is not meant to be shared with the game audience, but intended to provide valuable feedback about the game and if the design permits. So, developer and artist, to begin the test because of the game, we will fix identified bugs, work with concept and ideology, work with security, work with financials, because all of these components needs an important part in this phase where we secure the complete activity with respect to infrastructure. And that creates an understanding on what is done in pre-alpha. In a nutshell, we talk about prototype. Prototype. So we have pre-production and we have pre-alpha. Now let us move to the third step of the process, which is alpha. Now the alpha phase is another milestone within the game development, because the game has functionality in this phase, but it may be ridden with bugs and it's not fully optimized. So the game developer and the artist work to polish the game and its components in an iterative manner. And this phase also allows for deeper testing of the game to ensure functionality aligns with the overall intended design. Producers may become interested in this phase to determine the actual live release of the game. Simultaneously, game administrators may also begin preparations for the beta release. So, guys, we have three steps in the process, which starts from pre-production, pre-alpha, pre-alpha or vertical slice, and alpha. This is the phase where we talk about the important beta phase in the structure. Guys, I'm not moving slides because this is what is taken in the game structure. I just moved one for you to get clarified. Before it ends down, I'll just come back to my original slide. If you have any doubts, just focus on listen on different important phases Till now, we have talked about three important phases of game development, which is pre-production, pre-alpha, alpha, and now the fourth part, which we need to focus on, is beta. Now, when we talk about fourth phase, which is beta phase, is where the game is released to a selected audience for initial feedback and reporting of any bugs or related issues. At this time, the game has full functionality, is fully optimized, and may only contain few bugs or changes. There may be some implementation errors, but the game developer here and the artist will work relentlessly to remove those errors and bugs dynamically. The game administrator simultaneously starts planning the infrastructure, looking at the game's functionality, and reviewing how it could be monitored live. The beta phase also increases the hype associated with the game's official release, as only selected group as beta testers, and the development team should not underestimate the feedback. The objective of this phase is to have well architected framework and reviews which will define continuous live operations and analytic solutions of the game. That's the fourth and most important part in the complete process. Once this is done, that's where we come to the last phase, where the importance of game producer comes into the discussion. The game producer focuses on the management of the game after its release in the live phase. The game producer works with the team through all phases to provide and obtain game input that is used for marketing purposes. The goal of this phase is to ensure player retention, game expansion, and strategies for monetizing the game after its release. And that's where we need to think of the market. That's where we need to talk about different aspects which play an important role while creating and changing the structure of how we will have these games defined. Main game will have all these structures defined in the credits or the flows with which these are defined. Now, this
Dr.
fundamentally
Ahmed,
completes these.
excuse me for 1 minute.
Sure.
There are lots of people in the chat having side discussions. It's a little bit distracting for your colleagues. So kindly please only respond to things that are related to the topic. Lots of questions about the certification. I reassure you, you will receive them by the end of the month for any session that you've attended. You will not be receiving them on day-to-day basis. Any other questions that you have, you may email us privately, but please keep the chat to topics that are relevant to the topic. It's quite distracting for your colleagues, and Dr. Ahmed has put a lot of effort in this presentation, so please bear with us and stay focused so you can learn as much as possible. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mawa. Guys, be assured that we at the Complete UAE camp are working hard to make your learning experience fantastic, and all your committed deliverables, from certificates to coursewares to our contact details, will be provided to you into the process. We have just started the month, and there are plenty of learning activities planned this month. So, guys, focus on learning things, and you will have your certificates, documents, books, e-learning content as and when we proceed and conclude the camp by end of the month. Thank you, Mawa. I have reiterated it again, and let's focus on the topic which we are discussing. So, while talking about the entire process, starting from pre-production, pre-alpha, alpha, beta, and live release. 5-step process. Now, guys, this is the framework, fundamental process. Now, it also depends on you or your company or you as an individual if you want to have sub processes, because there could be multiple beta releases, there could be multiple alpha releases. Now that depends on the game which you're trying to build, how you are going to evolve around this game, what are the iterations you would do, and different aspects which will play an important role in that particular game segment. So that's why different processes will be involved and worked out. Now, as I said, this in the on the screen you can see a sample code of C++, which is a iterative. Loop means iterative. So there are three important functions which every game developer needs to know, which is looping, where we talk about process, update, and render. These three functions encompasses technically all the process which we have identified. In the process, we have methods which will execute the game concept, game ideology. In the updates, it will have the live components. And in the render, it will give the experience to the people which play an important role in the game development process. It is also very important for us to understand the different ways with which we accept the input and give the graphics. So as I said, while we create the iterative while loop in the programming, we will see few real-time examples in our tomorrow's sessions in how do we program and write the code, guys. For now, understand in the while loop, we have input which is given to the process function. We have update which updates the transactions or experiences which are operational. And we have render which updates the graphics, which are important part of the game as such. So this basic aspect will have different ways. Now this is one of the fundamental way. There are more complex ways depending on the program, depending on the languages which we plan to use. So guys, this is bullseye for everybody to think and define what we are talking about. Games versus movies. If you plan to get into this business, you can see the kind of revenue you can make as compared to movies. First week revenue for a movie is 239 million, wherein first week revenue for gaming across the globe is more than 500 million, guys. It's more than 500 million, guys. So while creating these games and different segments, it's very important to create the values of what we are planning to create, who all would be involved, what needs to be invested, and which kind of programming to be used. Apart from programming, visual arts is also very important. Now, when it comes to visual arts, I would like to talk about game genres, because game genres is basically an important concept while we understand the creation of game, because game development includes variety of types which are known as genres. Now these games align with different players based on games features, games layout, games concepts. Now when we talk about game genres, game development studio is used to develop variety of games, and each game is marked to a specific type of audience. Game types have different features that make them unique for player appeal, which is known as game genres. These genres are similar to music categories such as rock, jazz, which are based on similar features or components of the music. So game genres is something which you might be aware of, but let me reiterate. Fundamental game genre starts with genres like single player, turn-based player or asynchronous players, real-time or session-based games, and shared instances or persistent world. These are the four important and basic genres. Now, single player game is one that can be played by only one person. Example of single player game includes arcade or console based games. The opponent is actually the computer and not the other player. So the primary workload which we all need to understand for this game type is used for the database and content delivery. When we talk about cloud services, we can use Route 3, ELB from AWS segments to have a single player layer. Then we have turn-based or asynchronous game genre. Now, asynchronous game, also known as turn-based multiplayer game, players are able to partake the shared activity by taking turns in the playing. They're also able to play together without both being in the game. And this means that consoles do not need to communicate in real time with each other as game state, but are preserved for next asynchronous segments. Asynchronous games allows player to determine when it is convenient to play, continue, or work with the game segments. And then we have real-time games, which is also known as synchronous games, where players are able to interact in real time based on the single game instance. These days, synchronous games are in demand. And one more, or the last one, is the persistent world game, is where the game environment continues to evolve when there are no players currently logged in. The events with the game environment continue to occur if they would be in real. And guys, the wait is over, and this is the genre where artificial intelligence comes into the picture. That's where the evolvement of AI into the gaming industry is defined. That's how the structure. Okay, so that's how the structure of games are created with the different people, and that's where visual arts director, sound teams, audio teams, composer, audio engineers are involved in all these segments. The complete career revolves around different roles which we just discussed, and to make it public. And that's where there will be different biased activities and balances of different companies which evolve or which involve themselves uh, is defined. So if I reiterate, we have single player, we have turn based or multiplayer or asynchronous, we have real time, uh, and we have shared instance or persistent. There are four types of fundamental genres: single player, turn based, real time, and shared instances. And then there could be subgenres which are specifically broken and defined on different activities as and when it requires to work. So this basically is an important part of the complete evolution. Today, technology is continuing to evolve, and AWS GameTech is a cloud-based solution that can be used for game development. Let us take a look at how this evolution has solved game development challenges over the years, which is a cloud-based solution. So guys, you might be aware the balance of guessing which company is right for me and getting the right salary, or creating your own skill sets to prepare or build your own company is important. So while working on these skill set, different companies, different portfolios, options of developing industries and various segments, it is very important for all of us to understand the technology piece. Now, while talking about the technology piece, there are different game development activities which play an important role in defining the portfolios and skill sets. Now, skill set today revolves around three important aspects when it comes to artificial intelligence. Now, what are these three important aspects? One of the important aspects is data. Another important aspect is artificial intelligence. And third important aspect is the science behind it, and the science behind it. So basically, what happens is, while we talk about skill set, today, as I said, we need to talk about uh, artificial intelligence. We need to understand the game development in artificial intelligence, and we also need to understand the new tools like with the cloud technology which are available. So we will explore few tools, and one of the important tool which I was talking about is AWS solution on technology for game development, because games continue to evolve as per the player feedback when we talk about the AI in the game. Now, this feedback is not only about the experience, but also the interest which drives the iterative game development. For example, technology and games that were released 6 months ago may already be outdated in some case. This may be based on new technology, based on new features, based on how and what is possible. So, alternatively, we will have to create different game tech evolution, which will create an landscape of developing the games. So, we have client server applications, we have front end, back end applications, we have cloud computing applications, we have real time gameplay applications, we have AWS solution. We also have solutions around different cloud platforms like Microsoft, Google, and whatnot. So it's we who will have to decide on what kind of skill sets will be important for all of us to have the correct understanding of what and how we create the game. So we need to understand and define the correct practices on what is needed to have gaming in place. When we say gaming in place, it's very important for all of us to create the learning mechanism with which we will have different gaming components and different prices which will evolve through the process. In this game tech development, as we have discussed, just to reiterate and recap, we have discussed from the themes, from the concepts, from the roles, from the technologies, and the hosting environments. Having said that, we will have different aspects of creating these technologies on different player modes or different understanding of how the game tech works. So, as I said, we will have client server based technology. Now, what is a client server based technology? What basically happens? So, a client server is something where people or players will be able to download and update the patches and play. But the challenge is it will require softwares, it will require physical infrastructure, it will not work on the low bandwidth and whatnot. Similarly, we have concept of front end and back end games, where back end was completely hidden by the players, and front end is something with which game experience or the players experience, for which we will need the infrastructure, we'll need the servers on which the complete value of what needs to be identified will be defined. And then we have cloud based, because cloud based is something which is most cost effective, because this is something which will allow you to play as you pay as you consume, and the pay as you play. So you don't have to invest on any infrastructure, you don't have to purchase or procure any licenses, you don't have to think about scaling up or scaling down, because all the cloud providers from Microsoft Azure to AWS to Google Cloud, everybody has auto scaling capabilities. And with these capabilities, on the AWS cloud computing, we have few managed services. Now, what is a managed service? Managed service is nothing but a tool, a software, as a tool which will help you to use the existing code, existing infrastructure, existing program, and will be monitored and maintained by the cloud companies from which we can consume. And they have free tier access, they have paid access, and you pay and play only for what you consume for. And that's where the game tech capabilities can be scaled up globally with the standard features, can be competitive marketing, can have correct cost management, can have increased control of resources. Having said that, the most important part is the skill set, guys. Today, lack of expertise with cloud migration and game tech technology with artificial intelligence is the only hurdle for everybody to prepare and get and work on their gaming considerations. So it needs to be considered and created in a correct way for all of you to define the access. And that's where the complete picture of how these segments will be evolved and what will be conducted and how it will be conducted plays as an important factor or important role on the patterns with which we govern creating these game tech technologies. To create or to make money of what uh, is to be worked upon, you will have to not only upload your games to the play stores, but guys, you will also have to identify the correct mechanism with which we will market the games. And today's digital technologies, along with gaming conventions and AI based services, play an important role in defining the correct artificial intelligence for what the game talks about. Now, guys, we are talking about the game tech, and different tools and processes. But let's also try to understand what exactly do you mean by artificial intelligence. We are talking about artificial intelligence, right? We are talking about the game technologies like UI, backend, cloud, hosting environment, processes. But what exactly or how exactly you work on these technologies to have the artificial intelligence incorporated. So let's try and understand what exactly do you mean by artificial intelligence? What exactly do you mean by data? So before we talk about artificial intelligence, let's talk about data, because today every transaction and every activity is governed by data. You in 1 millisecond there is 700 billion transaction have happening per second based on the data, and that's where we will have the data transmission for correct analytics to be done. And that's why artificial intelligence comes into the picture. So artificial intelligence is nothing but simulation of human intelligence processed by machines like computers. But how exactly do we achieve it? By pre-processing and giving a correct value, correct data, correct input to a machine. So guys, please come out of the myth that artificial intelligence will take away all the jobs, will take away all the uh, opportunities. No, that's not true. Artificial intelligence is giving a new platform for you to learn, to have correct data, to overcome the correct processing time of specific information. So don't fall prey to any myth. Keep upgrading and keep learning, because based on your input, your machines will learn. And that's where artificial intelligence will apply on different aspects. So while talking about artificial intelligence, there are four types of artificial intelligence. One is the reactive machines. First type of artificial intelligence is reactive machines. Second type of artificial intelligence is limited memory. Third type of artificial intelligence is theory of mind. And fourth type of artificial intelligence is self awareness. Now, what we exactly mean is using these 4 types to have correct implementation in gaming industry, in finance industry, in banking industry, in retail industry. Uh, so let me reiterate, there are 4 types of AI: reactive machines, limited memory, theory of mind, and self-aware. These 4 types will use different products, different techniques, different tools to create the experience of artificial intelligence. Fundamentally, we all might have used Google Maps, right? What's that? What is face detection and recognition? What is autocorrect? What is chatbot? What is e-payment? All of this is nothing but artificial intelligence. And these techniques will play an important role irrespective of tool which we use. With this segments, if I have to give you a glimpse of these 4 types, first is reactive machines, which perform basic operations. Now, this level of AI is the simplest. These types react to some input with some output. Now, there is no learning that occurs. This is the first stage to any AI system in the machine learning. And there are different models of these machine learning techniques. Second type of AI is limited memory. Limited memory refers to an AI's ability to store previous data uh, and or predictions, using that data to make better predictions. With limited memory, machine learning or architecture becomes more complex, and every machine learning model requires limited memory to be created, but the model can be deployed on different aspects. This may include reinforcement learning or different learning tactics like long short term or EGAN or various algorithms for that matter. And this will be applied with the continuous process of training data, building machine learning model, predicting, taking feedback, doing changes, and then going back to the first step. The third type, which we discuss, is theory of mind. We have yet to reach theory of mind artificial intelligence types because these are the only beginning phases. AI begins to interact with thousand thoughts of humans, emotions of humans, l- like hate, like love, like every emotion which a human has. Presently, machine learning models do a lot of person directed at achieving a task. However, emotional intelligence and analytics behind the AI is a research where people are working. And that's where game tech will also play a major role, or technology in the games will also play a major role. And the fourth type is self-aware, which basically something like machine where these machines act as nirvana. This kind of AI is only in stories and still research and tech oriented segments. These are also divided into 3 important aspects like artificial narrow intelligence, which is ANI, artificial general intelligence, which is AGI, and artificial super intelligence, which is ASI. In the game tech, we basically work with artificial narrow intelligence and theory of mind and limited memory. These 3 can be used in the gaming techniques and will play an important role while creating the all practices for defining the correct methods with which we will create some games. So this was a fundamental introduction today, aligning with important practices around game technologies, around the concept of creating our own gaming company. What are the roles? What are the people? What are the technologies? What are the tools? How AI plays an important role in this particular technology is something which is important and will be applicable. I am posting, I'm open for questions now. Whatever questions you have, we can take those questions. But before we start about the Q&A, let me post a Google form. Now, this is very important for you guys to fill and submit your details without any spelling mistakes in your name, without any spelling mistakes in your email ID, and of course the correct numbers, because this will help us to prepare correct certificates and share the learning material, courseware, books to you on your email, and of course the certificates. So I would request all of you to open those Google forms and submit your details. Now I am open for questions. Please feel free to ask questions. This was about today's session. Tomorrow's session, we will be focusing majorly on exploring few games and exploring few technologies, exploring few programming practices, exploring few languages also, and exploring the cloud infrastructure where games are deployed and hosted. That would be objective of our today's session, and we will see some action in tomorrow's session. Thank you very much. Open for questions, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. I think I will start by reading a few questions here, and then we'll take the questions for the people who are raising their hands. Okay, you guys should bear with me. The questions are, there are lots of questions. One repeated question is, how can they make money from free games?
So, okay, very good and valid question, guys. Making money is important, right? So what happens, people, is we will have to first develop a game. Once objective of the session is to develop and host the games. Now, making money is relied based on the correct promotion and correct participation you do. You have to identify the companies with which you will promote your games, and based on the number of users. Like, let me give you a simple example. If you have developed a game and posted on the Play Store or iOS Apple Store, now if there are no people coming to your application, you might not earn money. So there is a deal between you and App Store or Play Store. The more number of people accessing your app, the more number of money App Store or Play Store pays back to you. So there are different SLAs and different payment or earning options with these companies, which can be explored once games are developed and available. Thank you. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. There is another question, and I think I've read it also before. If they don't have a relevant degree, can they still have experience in the gaming industry, and or like a programming opportunity?
Yes. Answer to your question is yes. This industry works on your knowledge and your ideation. Even if you don't have the degree, but you have good amount of knowledge in programming, good amount of knowledge in analytics, good amount of knowledge in data and visualizing, you can certainly work in this industry and perform well and earn well.
Okay, one last question from the chat, and then I'll answer the questions from the people who have raised their hands. Can you say an app store where we can upload an app for free?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
They'd like to know if there's an app store where they can upload their games for free.
The first 1 year is free, guys, but with the limitation of some sizes. But Apple, if you are going into production and want to earn, it's always better to test your apps on Macs and then do a SLA engagement with the App Store.
Just to add on that, we do have another session on having a place in the App Store. So you can check on our website to learn more about having that place in the App Store and having a good appearance in the App Store, you can join that session for more information on that specific topic. Let's take the questions from the participants raising their hands. Rital, I hope I'm reading your name right. Please go ahead, ask.
Thanks for letting me ask a question. And I always make 2D games on a website. Can I make like a 3D games?
Sorry, I didn't understood your question. Can you repeat that, please?
I think they want to know if they're working on 2D games, how can they make it 3D? I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, but I think that's what was asked.
So if we are talking about the, I will talk about the designing part of it, because you're talking about 2D and 3D. So there are different tools like Unity 3D and other tools around Autodesk products, which can be used to convert your 2D to 3D and to develop 3D games, which has built-in characters, which has built-in visual interfaces, which could be utilized. So you can try exploring that without having any programming knowledge and without having any hosting knowledge, because these are the design tools and you would be able to design a game. The functionality and the performance comes to the infrastructure or programming side. That is something for which probably you will have to learn programming.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Let's take the question from Wasim.
Hello.
Yes, Wasim, please go ahead.
I'm asking about Battle Royale gaming and how can use AI capabilities in iPad, like example. iPad, Apple iPad have a neural engine inside the processor.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So what basically happens is, as I said, as we started our session, your strategy is first very important. You can certainly use iPad and you have different apps which will help you to develop games, including Unity 3D on your iPad. But the point to evaluate, Wasim, is what kind of game are you planning to create? What is the structure behind that game? What is the technology stack you would like to use? Because once games are developed, they can be used in any devices. But if you want to develop something on iPad or for iPad which is more artistic and defined, there are apps like AWS GameTech or Unity 3D or Blend Components which will be useful to have the visual appearance. But then for functionality is very important that you learn the correct algorithms to be applied. Now coming to the second part of your question, which is artificial intelligence. Now artificial intelligence is all about giving experience, all about responses. Now you have I'm sure that you might have used Siri, or you might have used Alexa or Google Home. What is that? All of this is artificial intelligence. So similarly, you can have create curated responses based on the machine learning and data algorithms for all your games which you plan to create. So first and most important part, Wasim, and for everybody it is very important, is first draft a plan on what are we planning to achieve, and then draft different capabilities and technologies with which we can integrate this plan with. I hope that answers your question, Wasim.
Thank you. Thank you.
We can take the question from Mustafa.
Yes, hello.
Yes, Mustafa.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Ahmed and Marwa for asking questions. I want to ask about what is the best major to enter to know more about AI and game techs and how to develop games.
A best measure means you're talking about the learning part of it, Mustafa? So if I have understood your question, Mustafa, correctly, you want to know more about what needs to be learned. So there are two different aspects here. Correct me if your question, I've understood your question and it's appropriate. One is the GameTech. Now, to learn GameTech, we have different options. There are degrees, there are different short courses, there are different technologies, there are different languages which you can select and learn. And second important question which you asked is the artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is something which is required to be learned from the foundations of application where it will be applied, from the application of AI for everyone, application of AI for different businesses, and application for AI for game tech. Both can be integrated as and when the experience has to be created. And the integration of these two, which is artificial intelligence and programming, is completely based on the web services or the cloud infrastructure where we plan to deploy these applications. I hope I answered your question, Mustafa. Thank you for asking that.
Okay, I think we have time for one final question, and then we will take this conversation forward tomorrow, inshallah. Mahmoud, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, good afternoon all.
Good
Assalamu
afternoon,
alaikum.
Mahmoud. Salam alaikum salam.
How is a simple AI is formed? Like, what is the basics of it?
So fundamental or simple AI, Mahmoud, is the transaction, which is input and output. You give an input and you receive an output, which is a standard program without any machine learning.
That's. So the learning process, then after that, will like apply the inputs and outputs.
Right. Because to learn, we will need a lot of data, right? If we do not have good input, probably machine will not be able to learn. Let's say, let me give you an example. If we have created an AI and we have taught our program to prepare a tea, let's take a very simple. Now, to prepare tea, what do you require? Probably you require hot water, you require sugar, you require tea bags, right? Which becomes the input. You have programmed to prepare a tea and you input them with chicken. Machine will fail, right?
Of course, yeah.
So your input has to be correct to have the correct learning patterns in the AI segments.
So as also of the inputs must match which data will be received.
Right. Which data will be received and what will be trained or learned with the help of machine learning.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.